So as promised, this second part is on the essential aspect of my thesis, my research. Research I started many years ago and continuing because it's such an important topic, at least in my eyes, having helped different people in spiritual life. But before starting, and in the end as well, I will take the opportunity to thank you, but I know that some of you might have to run. So thank you very much for many of you present, and maybe some also watching in the future the video, for all your help, moral support, spiritual support, and as well financial support. Many of you from a small contribution of nothing to whatever is the size, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you understood the importance of spiritual life for the church. You understood the importance of the School of Mary, what we are trying to give and transmit, offer in the church. And this is what matters, is understanding the importance of spiritual life, the formation in spiritual life, and of course, as a consequence, whatever was you felt was right and possible for you to give, you gave it, and I'm immensely grateful to you, because this allowed me to have, for now, a year almost, already a year of time, free time to work for you, for the church. So I hope to share a little bit of the fruits of this research. The Lectio Divina as well is the fruit. I'm not only all the seven days doing this. I give myself a few hours of leisure of doing other topics. Otherwise, I can explode. So, but the majority of the time is given to the thesis. So, from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure from Our Lady's heart, we do, her and me, thank you deeply for your support. Whatever is your support doesn't matter. It's even if you didn't give anything, that's fine. It's your moral support, your prayer that count, because I hope you understand how important is spiritual life for the church and how much it's needed, how spiritual formation is needed, and this is simply the mission of the School of Mary. So you are allowing the School of Mary to continue. Otherwise, of course, I have faith and I believe in the providence of God who led me. I'm 56 years old, so if I'm doing it for more than 30 years, it's bound to continue. But still, one has to have the total humility also to say thank you for all the benefactors, because without you, the school cannot continue. So thank you again for your support. Unfortunately, I will have to extend a few more months the PhD, because it's not finished yet. So we will talk about that later. We will be sending a newsletter about that. So again, I'm sorry. There are huge fruits this past year, but the work is still ongoing. So if you can contribute, whatever you can, that is highly appreciated in different forms, transfer or whatever, done through the bank transfer, whatever, anything, it always helps. Please remember that it depends also on you for the school to continue to, not to survive, but to live and be fruitful. And please don't hesitate to give a hand as well in the spreading of the spiritual life, okay? So thank you, and allow me now to give you an idea. I already talked about some aspects of the PhD, the thesis, in the past months. I think it was in April. You have 3 talks. You can check them online. They are available for free. You can watch them, and there are more on Therese that I gave more recently. You can watch them as well. They are a bit a continuation because Therese, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, the French one, is very much part of the life and intellectual life of the author I'm studying, which is Father Louis Guillet. So the topic, very quickly, the topic of my PhD is the contribution of a French, unknown French Carmelite who died in 1992. I knew him personally, and I received many teachings, and I had the possibility, the grace of knowing him on a teaching level, and him teaching me and others, and having him in personal one-to-one conversation. I benefited from him immensely because he was totally in love, of course, with God, with Jesus, with Our Lady, but also with John of the Cross. So the one who really shed light on John of the Cross, and who was always delighted to see people reading John of the Cross. It's in his honor that I'm doing the thesis to show his contribution in the understanding of the spiritual journey. And by that, I will say the following. The spiritual journey, in a classic way, and I will go through that very quickly. So the title of the thesis is the contribution of, I won't write it, the contribution of Father Louis Guillet, contribution of Father Louis, it's like Louis, Guillet. He's not known, so don't try to find where he is, etc. He only has few books in French, and that's it. He's more known in the Carmelite world in France, but very little outside. One or two books have been translated into Italian, that's it, and they are not the major ones. So, unfortunately, you will only hear from him if you read French or if you follow attentively what we'll be saying now. So, contribution of the Father Louis Guillet to the architecture, I know architecture seems a bit too pompous. Architecture of the after. I'm translating from French, and my thesis is in French with the Dominicans in Rome, the Angelicum, of the after union with God. After union. So, the journey in spiritual life, we have growth, we have different stages, we have union with Jesus, and then do we have something after it, or we die immediately after? So this is the question that puzzled Father Louis all his life. He's born 1902, he died 1992, venerable age. He worked all his life, he studied all his life despite the fact of all the responsibilities he had. And it's toward the end of his life, the last 15 years of his life, which is interesting, no? After 75, you become very fruitful and productive, more productive than before. He was very productive before, but he became even more productive. The books I'm studying are written from 76 onward, and he dies in 96, so. The question for him was twofold. The first is, we have union described by the tradition of the church, and since he's Carmelite, he relies a lot on Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. So he says, after the union, according to the description of John of the Cross, we have a little bit of intensification of the fire of the love of God, and then, according to St. John of the Cross, there is death. So this red line here, shows, according to our understanding of St. John of the Cross, where things end. We die, we fall in the hands of God. We die out of fullness of love, and then we die in sort of like ecstasy, and like Teresa of Avila when she dies, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus when she dies, etc. So that's a general opinion. 19th century, wealth, crowned by John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila in the 16th century, saying this. Not challenged, undiscussed, that's it. I will go through that after. But for Father Louis, there is a huge problem. You have Therese of the Child Jesus, who dies in 1897. And for the last year and a half of her life, she undergoes a very mysterious trial. And for Father Louis, that's a problem. He has to solve that problem. He spent his entire life trying to solve that problem. How can we situate what is happening to Therese in the journey as it is described by the major masters, more specifically Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. There is no place to put that trial after union. The only dark moment in life is here. The dark night of the spirit. So some theologians, Therese dies 1897. Father Louis is born 1902. So in the 20s of last century, he is almost in his 20s also. Religious, priest, then etc. So Therese is very important at that moment. We can't fathom the importance of Therese in the church at that time. Therese has a hurricane of glory, is called in French, no? Un ouragan de gloire, hurricane of glory. You hardly enter in a Catholic church in any place in the world and you don't find a statue or an image of Saint Therese of Child Jesus. There are no other saints. Of course, I'm not talking about Our Lady or Saint Joseph. I'm talking about, or Jesus. I'm talking about saints, normal saints. There are no other saints who have such impact in the church. Try, enter in a Catholic church and try to fish out where is Saint Therese's image or the majority of them will have it. Despite the fact we're not in France. Okay? Got a point? Now, she was major, but he is a Carmelite. He needs to understand in order to to understand the journey in order to guide people. Imagine he meets a nun like Therese, who is in the same problem. And this certainly happened, even though he doesn't mention it explicitly. You meet a nun who is like Therese, undergoing this trial, which is what she feels, that heaven disappeared, she doesn't have any perception of heaven, etc. And that to do one act of faith cost her enormous effort. Enormous effort. So it's very tragic when you think about it. So imagine you are, as a priest, as a Carmelite, giving spiritual direction to a Carmelite nun or a layperson. Doesn't matter, can be a layperson as well, why not? Who is undergoing something like that? Solve the problem. Are you placing the person here or mystery? Where is the person spiritually? What is happening? How can you explain what is happening to this person? So, Father Louis had two opinions in his time. And when I say his time, you know, it goes from the 20s, last century, it's all last century, okay? So the 20s till say 70s and even 80s, okay? He has two options. One says, Therese is here. So she's not even united with God. It's way before. She's undergoing purification, deep purification. When you look in a superficial way and read what is happening to Therese, her description, few lines, her description in the Story of the Soul, you can read that. And when you compare it with the Dark Night of the Spirit in St. John of the Cross, so the Dark Night, book 2, when you compare them, you say, it seems that there is a similarity. Oh, but we need to be very, very careful. Similarity is not enough. So, some theologians said she's undergoing purifications. And some others said, no, after union, there is a possibility to have a sort of a mixed thing, purification, but in a very minor dimension, very little, because there is always a need for purification. I'm quoting. I'm not of this opinion. So they say there is a little bit of purification, which brings us back here. But anyway, but majorly it is a participation into the passion of the Lord, participation into the redemption. So she's in a way carrying the sins of others majorly, with a little proportion of purification, but majorly a participation. This is more or less the state of things in the 19th century of whoever wanted to say something about Therese's trial. I won't go through it. I did mention it before in the other talks. You can go back. But this is the starting point of Father Louis, and this is the starting point of my thesis, because I'm following him. I'm not following myself. I'm following what he's doing. Now, this brings us to major questions. And this is why I spent so long on the first part, and I have to work more on the first part, finish it. I mean, it's done, I think, on the first part of the thesis. Why? Because we need to understand from where this division of spiritual life comes. Why there are people throughout the ages, 19th century we are the last century, we are not this century, we are last century with Father Louis. So why do we have, and sadly we are still in the last century, if you want. We haven't moved yet. Why do we have, in the history of spirituality in the church, a division of spiritual life, of the journey of spiritual life, a division made in 3 stages. This is what we have. Why do we have this and not something different? And by the way, this model, modelisation, how do you say modelisation in English?
Modern times?
No, modelisation, not modern. Modeling? Modeling. You modelize? You modelize? Not model. Huh? You model? You model spiritual life according to your understanding of the gospel. You model, you gave a possible explanation of what is the journey. In the gospel we have some indications, but not many. St. Paul says, oh, I wish I was talking to the perfect, but in fact no, I'm more talking to the people led by their psyche, their soul, so they are still very earthly in their understanding and not spiritual. St. Paul says, I wish everybody will reach the fullness of the height of Christ. But apart from that, we acknowledge, the gospel seems to acknowledge, the New Testament seems to acknowledge that there are stages of growth. You can fish out few indications, the old man, the new man, the perfects, the proficients, but we don't have more indications in the Old Testament. So there isn't a clear acknowledgement in the gospel. So I'm trying to show you the history now of the division of spiritual life. How did it happen? The gospel seems very clearly to indicate that there are stages of growth, here and there you can find, but we don't have a full explicit doctrine on spiritual growth in the gospel. It is there, nobody can question it, but we don't have a structured modeling of the journey. Do you follow me? So we know that Jesus is God, we know that Jesus is man, we know that Jesus is the way, we know that we have a journey, we know that we have to follow him, we know that there is an entrance in the kingdom of God here on earth, mysterious. We know that there are stages, we know imperfects, more psyche, more of the led by their psyche there rather than the spirit. We know that there are perfects, but this is all what we know. Now, it end up, I'm giving you the ends, and then I will go quickly through the journey of that doctrine. In the time of Father Louis, especially the first part of last century, still the world wasn't shaken yet. So we were still believing in what we believed for 18 centuries. So we had an opinion, and I will tell you the history of the birth of this opinion, and it's the very little development, by the way. We had the opinion, and you still find it in the major works written before the 50s, no? That said that spiritual life has 3 stages: purification, illumination, and union. Or purgative, illuminative, and unitive way, or piece of journey, or stage. This is the opinion in the world in which Father Louis lived. This is the opinion in the world we lived as Christians for 19 centuries. More or less, a bit less. From where comes this division? Because this division is included it's half implicit in St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila. It's not there 100%, but it's present, no? He talks about purification, but for him purification is 2 stages, no? It's the sense, not the senses, the sense and the spirit, 2 areas in us. So the purification of the sense, the purification of the spirit. Then he talks about betrothal, like engaged, being engaged, which is here the illumination. Then he talks about union. So we have the 3 bits here, you see? 1, 2. It's present. He doesn't mention it, but it's present in his structure. So this is purification in St. John of the Cross. This is illumination, betrothal. Then we have union. So John of the Cross, in a way, is following that classic structure. But from where that classic structure comes? And I need all your attention here, because this is the reason why I'm spending so much time on that issue. Because something happens in the early centuries, and this is what I would like to explore with you. Okay? So I divide first a general glimpse of the structure, the history, but then I will focus more on certain things. So I will divide, these are the 19th centuries. This is Middle Age time. This is John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila until today. So this is 16th century. This is Middle Age, so high middle, like 10 to, say 13 for now. It's, of course, it goes further, but say 10 to 13. And then we have here, so this is the first millennium, till here. And here we have, say, till the 6th century, we have something that will take place. In the history of theology, we talk about the Greek fathers and the Latin fathers. But the patrology in general, patrology comes from the fathers of the church. We divide them between Greek and Latin. Greek speaking, not Greek nationality, because we don't have Greek nationality at that time, and not Latin nationality. Well, do you have the Roman Empire? So Latin speaking people and Greek speaking people. Almost dividing East and West. The eastern of the Mediterranean. It's a very little pond. You look at the Mediterranean and almost split it in 2. Despite the fact that in the south of Italy, till now, we have masses in Greek, but nobody knows about that. So, the Greek fathers are a little bit more advanced than the Latin fathers, in the sense that they have the seeds, and the seeds will go to the Latin fathers, and then they will spread. Very quickly, we have here some major authors. I will mention 3, 4, 5 authors. So from the Greeks, I will mention Origen first. Origen and Gregory of Nyssa. Gregory of Nyssa. So we are talking 3rd and 4th century. Gregory of Nyssa. 335 he's born, 394 he dies. Origen dies 253. So a bit after. These, by the way, with a mysterious man called Dionysius. We'll talk about him. These are the main guys, the main geniuses who will develop spiritual life, spiritual theology. It doesn't mean that the others didn't. Don't get me wrong. But these are really the fathers of mysticism, the fathers of spiritual life. Okay? Dionysius is a very mysterious man because we don't know anything about him. Today we consider that he is between the end of the 4th century and the 5th century. We guess that out of studying his texts and what we can gather from a text from the internal criticism and then placing it in a historical context, so you can guess more or less the concepts are present at which era, etc. I'll mention other after, but these are Greek. They write in Greek. The original is in Greek here. These guys will, and one before, but I don't want to overwhelm you with other names. Clement of Alexandria, very important, right before Origen. Origen is in Alexandria. Gregor of Nyssa is the other side of, a little bit other side of the pond, if you have Alexandria, so it's the south of the Mediterranean, then you go a little bit north and east. So Gregory of Nyssa. Dionysius, we don't know. The three of them speak Greek, write in Greek, but they will do something that will, fortunately or unfortunately, we have to see both sides with great peace, that will influence the rest of spirituality. And it is because of their Greek culture. It is because of their Greek culture. So we are in the 1st century seeing major authors in spiritual life, in spiritual theology, who influence spiritual theology. They influence other areas as well. They influence biblical exegesis and theology and dogma and other areas. But they are the fathers of spiritual theology, in a way. Of course, with St. John, the evangelist, and St. Paul. Now, what they will do is that they come from a Greek culture. So they are conditioned by their own culture. So they see things through their own culture. These are people who are learned in philosophy, in their own Greek culture. What is the major input of Greece at that time, before Jesus and after Jesus, many centuries after Jesus? What is the main input? What is the main thing that Greece is giving to the world? Philosophy. But not the philosophy that we know today. The philosophy we know today is almost a completely twisted understanding of what is philosophy. Philosophy for the Greeks is very much like a monastic or hermetic life for us. The philosopher is a person who left everything, who gave everything for the sake of the wisdom. Philo, Sophia. He likes, he aims, or she likes or aims Sophia, the wisdom, the contemplation. So it's a life that looks very much like our hermits or the monks, the Buddhist monks or the sannyasis in Hinduism. So it's a person who is really going for a spiritual quest. And in the knowledge of the Greeks, they divided even their education in these 3 stages that we saw earlier on. So the 3 stages of the Greek education follow this structure. So the first thing is physics, which will correspond for us to the purification, that correspond for them also because they mention it, and at a certain point in history the 3 are one. The 3 that I mentioned before, which is purification, illumination, union. Then you have physics. But what is physics? It's not our physics. Physics is the knowledge of all what exists. Then you have what we would call today ethics or moral. And then you have a more contemplative stage toward the end. At a certain moment in history, these 3 and what I just explained, which is the Greek system of education, blend in one. Now, what interests us is what?
So what was the third one that you mentioned? You said physics, ethics, and then...
Contemplation, theoria or theology, both. It depends. So either theology, the Greek philosophers use the word theology, but not in the meaning we put to it, but not far. This is today how we do things, but in the structure of the journey of growth goes first. Yes, it's included. The metaphysics is the last stage, if you prefer, but not as it is understood today, but more as a theodicea, which is seeking God himself. So yes, the being, which is metaphysics, are interested in the being as such, but the deeper metaphysics is seeking the being, who is then God himself. Now, the system of education of the Greeks works like this. We are not talking yet about Christianity. Imagine now you are a Greek person living in this culture, having this system of education. I can't overwhelm you with all the quotations, etc. If you want, one day you can come to my office downstairs here. I can show you the books, I can show you the authors, can send you texts so you could verify and check all what I'm saying. I'm just giving it in a more gentle way, not too tiring. Okay? But if you want more details, please do come and I can share the details. Now what will happen now here, what I'm about to describe, is the most mysterious thing that everybody is struggling to understand what happened, why they accepted it, etc. But, you know, it takes a few years in order to say, what is really, why they accepted it this way. So, imagine you are a Greek. Gregory of Nyssa is a perfectly learned Greek person. In the culture, in the Greek culture, in the philosophy of the Greeks. But remember, philosophy is not what we understand about it today. Philosophy for them is a spiritual quest. And I recommend the reading of a great modern historian and philosopher, French philosopher, named Pierre Hadot. Pierre, like Peter, Hadot with an H. He died, unfortunately, 4 years, maybe 5 years ago. Pierre Hadot. We owe Pierre Hadot our understanding of what was philosophy for the Greeks. Not today. Today is something completely different. I insist a lot. You need to read at least one of the main books of Hadot in order to understand what was philosophy for the Greeks. It was a spiritual exercise. Exercice spirituel. This is an Ignatian expression, by the way. It was a spiritual exercise, and he proves it. He shows all the texts, he shows everything. He said this is how it was, and But today is more, we study the history of philosophy. We never study what is to philosophize. Of course, there is an excellent influence from Thomas Aquinas in the categorization, etc. But we shouldn't forget what was philosophy at that time. So now, you are Gregory of Nyssa, and then you discover you are formed this way, so this is your school, intellectually, but as well as a spiritual invitation. And then you discover the gospel. Unconsciously, and this is my point, unconsciously, what you will see is what your culture is allowing you to see. It might be a very sad statement for you, what I'm saying, but it is a correct statement. You receive from the gospel what you can receive from the gospel. We are limited. It doesn't mean that the seed of the divine seed will not grow and won't make of us saints. It will make of us saints. But saints who have an understanding, a limited understanding. Understanding is something, holiness is different. Holiness is not understanding. Holiness is not knowledge in the sense of common meaning of the word. So we can be very holy, but explaining correctly, that's another deal. So they tried to explain according to what they had. All of them fell in the trap. But it was done unconsciously, implicitly. They never chose to limit the gospel to 3 stages. Because what Father Louis will do is a breakthrough saying, after these 3 stages, there are other stages. First time ever in history, one man says that in Christian, Catholic history. Hence the use of the thesis I'm doing. The first time ever in history, one man comes and says, oh, no. But he says it in a very humble way, in a very, very gentle way. He was very respectful of everything, no? So his way is saying, no, after union there is something more. And he has a synthesis book, of course it's in French, where he puts union and he creates a completely new part, new section of the book. So we have the first section, the second section, the third section, and the fourth section. After union, what can happen? And the trial of Therese is placed there. Could be placed there, is placed there in his mind, etc. So this is mind-blowing. It's like the triune structure is not destroyed, because you cannot throw what they said in the bin. What they said is correct. But there is a difference between correct and incomplete. Do you follow me? So he's the first one to say, Therese of the Child Jesus is pushing us theologians, specialized in spiritual theology, to enlarge our understanding of the spiritual journey and think out of the Greek box. So it's not all Greek. You follow me? That's a breakthrough.
There was no input of the Latin one.
No input? There is an input. Okay, now it's a good question. There is no input of the Latin one. Now, let me tell you a little bit the story. It is not rigidly contained in 3 compartments in the beginning. No. This happens in the Middle Ages because of a man, one man, this one. So, if you read, and this is why I wanted to do this research, I maybe wasn't asked to do that, I could just focus on Father Louis, did what he did, and that's it, Bob's your uncle, it's done, it's finished. No, because I didn't have peace. I wanted to understand what happened, why we arrived to that rigid compartmentation of the 3, and when did it happen? In the 1st century, we have a great flexibility, and the honor of the gospel is safe. In the sense that there is a possibility in certain authors to understand that there is more into it. I can't go through all the details. If you study St. Augustine, and St. Augustine is amongst the Latin ones, he has 2 to 3 different ways of structuring the journey. And none of them, by the way, follows the Greeks. So you can say he has 3. He has the Greek one, he doesn't mention it a lot. He has a new one, completely breakthrough, following the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, as the 7 stages of growth. We still don't do it today. And we have a third one that follows a different journey. I don't want to enter into the detail now. So we have flexibility. If you read Origen, Origen has a total and utter influence from the Greek culture. He speaks Greek, he writes in Greek, but he still has possibility. He doesn't say that's the end of it. So he uses the Greek structure. For instance, in the beginning of his commentary, of the short commentary of the Song of Songs, Song of Songs of Solomon in the Old Testament, he has two versions, a long version, a long commentary, and then a short one. The short one, the prologue of it is mind-blowing, and he says that there is not only, and here is one of the reasons why they kept that structure, there is not only a Greek source of it, but he says there is a Hebrew source for the division in three. He says that according to the Jewish tradition, so we are in the 3rd century, this is a Christian man talking about actual Jewish people in his time, quoting them. And the history of Origen says that he was even trained by a Jewish wise man in Egypt. No, Ammonius Saccas. We don't have the proof, but this was said. So he says that from the Hebrew origin as well, there is something that matches perfectly the Greek opinion, because for the Hebrews, 3 of the books of wisdom, you know the books of wisdom, like Wisdom, Ecclesiastes, Qoheleth, and the others, 3 of them are in fact 3 stages of growth. So the book of Proverbs is the beginning of one, and then this, and then you have in the end the Song of Songs. So the Holy of the Holies of Union is the Song of Songs. Do you follow me? So each book was in charge of one stage of growth. Beautiful, beautiful, isn't it? He says this is a Hebrew tradition. I'm getting it from the Jews. I'm not inventing it. It comes from them. So put yourself in his place. And Origen is before Gregory. Origen dies 253. Gregory, I said, is 335. He's born 335 till 394. So it's after him. Origen is educated in the Greek system. He has as a predecessor Clement of Alexandria, who swallowed and assimilated the Greek system. But now he has another source, so for him it works perfectly. He will not in a million years question that, because it comes even from another source, a tradition transmitted amongst the Jews that these 3 books are in fact leading the human being in 3 stages. You could read if you want, and I can send you if you want as well the photocopy of them. It's a bit forbidden, but I can do it. Of the
what was the middle book, please?
I forgot. I forgot. I forgot. You might know. I don't know. No, because there are more than 3. So the last one is the Song of Songs. The first one, I think, is the book of Proverbs. The middle one, sorry, I forgot. It's one of the books considered from Solomon. The 3 of them are considered from Solomon. I think one could be Wisdom, and one is Proverbs. So you'd have, I think, in the following order, you would have Proverbs, Wisdom, and then Song of Songs. If this is wrong, I will text you or email you the correct order. You can find it, as I said, in the prologue of the short commentary of the Song of Songs made by Origen. He mentions that tradition, that Jewish tradition, matching very well with the Greek tradition. So you are cornered here. You can't escape. It's like convincing, more than convincing. It's not wrong, but it's not complete. You follow me? Now, I need to go a little bit quicker. What will happen is that Dionysius, this mysterious man, his books spread more or less from the 6th, 7th century onward. They come in the Western world, if I'm not wrong, starting from the 9th and 10th century, translated into Latin. Scott Erigenus, I think, is, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, who translates, and we have two different translations into Latin. This man is a mysterious man. We don't know anything about him, but we claim to know who he was for centuries, hence his influence. If you read the Acts of the Apostles, you will find when St. Paul is talking to the Areopagus, which is the Greek House of Parliament, if you want, or something like that, he has a big speech, finishes with the resurrection. They almost laugh at him and say, oh, look, we will listen to you another day. The end of this text finishes by what? Saying, some remained with Paul, and amongst them they mention a certain Dionysius. So, the tradition developed in the early Middle Ages that this man was entrusted by Paul with the secrets, the deeper knowledge and teaching of spiritual life. Because St. Paul, in more than one letter, and the letter to the Hebrews as well, says, I wish I could tell you about the wisdom, but I can't. Because the wisdom is for the perfect, and you are behaving. They had jealousy and stories between this and that. And so read. Sorry, I can't remember the letter now, but First of Corinthians, very likely, and the letter to the Hebrews, but the letter to the Hebrews is not of Paul, is maybe Apollos. So he says that I can't teach you the deeper levels of wisdom because you are still acting very humanly. You have jealousies between you. So you are not ready for a deeper teaching. So the tradition from, 7th onward century, said that this Dionysius, the book we had, we have a corpus, we still have it today. I don't have it in English, I have it in French and Italian, so you can check if you want. Of course in Greek, the original is in Greek. These books, where the people were convinced in the church, bishops and everybody, were convinced that these books belong to St. Paul's disciple. So that has such an authority, apostolic authority, because St. Paul entrusted, according to the name and legend, has entrusted the secret teaching to this man. And these books contain that secret teaching. And indeed, when you read Dionysius, it's simply mind-blowing. We have it in English. You can buy it if you want. This is the French version. This is a French version, Œuvre complète du pseudo. So today we call him the pseudo Dionysius. Why? Because it's not proven by our research that this man, these writings belong to the 4th, 5th century, late 4th, 5th century. So they cannot be coming from that man. Remember, you had legends as well, legends or stories of holiness, sainthood, about the first bishop of Paris, Denis. So we mixed the three of them. We mixed these writings with the Dionysius of St. Paul, with the first bishop of Paris, the famous Denis. So that was the common thing accepted in the Middle Ages, but seriously accepted even to serious people like Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great, Saint Bonaventura. Thomas Aquinas commented mainly 3 people. Can you name them? Aristotle, leave him, he's a philosopher. So, okay, that's good, we forget. So who are the 2 others who are Christians? No, apart from the Bible, I'm talking about authors. He read he read all Augustine, so he quotes abundantly Augustine. I'm talking Middle Ages, and I'm trying to show you how step by step that doctrine, that division in three, will crystallize and rigidify and remains until last century, until it will implode in the 60s or explode. Today we don't believe in anything. I can show you some articles, some authors, etc. It's very vague, it's not precise. Why? Because it's exploded for reasons I don't have time to explain that. So I'm just trying to explain to you how something that had great flexibility with these authors, with St. Augustine, with Gregory of Nyssa, with Origen, different images, the image of the mountain, the different stages, very much present the Greek system, but we had other systems, even gospel systems, like the genius of Saint Augustine, no, to suggest the seven gifts of the Holy Spirit as stages of growth. That's mind blowing. Never seen before Augustine. Augustine is the first one to do it. It's the result of his retreat. I don't know if you attended my course on the Sermon on the Mount. I tell this little story. No? He started his ministry as a priest after 40 days of retreat, and he spent them on the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew, St. Matthew. So you have amazing possibilities, but very much the Greek system is there. The division in three is there. Now, what will rigidify things is what? Is that Dionysius enjoys an utter reputation. He is from an apostolic origin. He is the one, the receptacle, the one who received all the deep teaching from St. Paul. And it's true, you can read, it's beautiful, it's deep, it's beautiful, one of the most beautiful books you can read. John of the Cross read him, and he quotes him 1 or 2 times. Okay? So this Dionysius will be translated into Latin. We have 2 different translations in the Middle Ages. And then Thomas Aquinas will comment Dionysius. It's almost an apostolic book. This is why he has to comment it. You see what I'm trying to say? He reads Augustine, he quotes Augustine, but he will comment Dionysius as he comments the Holy Gospel, the Holy Scriptures. It's impressive. Yeah.
There's 300 years between St. Paul and Dionysius.
No. We today say that there are 300 years, but in the Middle Age, we confuse the 3 together. We never saw that. It's only recently in history where we say, some people say, no, the philosophy embedded in his writings comes from, it's a post-Platonic and Plotinian, post-Plotinian era, so it has to be end of 4th and 5th. But we have no proof either or. It's just the scientific people today, it's 99.999 say that he doesn't belong because of the text itself, because of the words in the text. One of the rarest people today to rehabilitate Dionysius is Pope Benedict. If you read his encyclical letter, God is Love, he mentions him.
Sorry,
yeah?
rehabilitate him as what? In your translation.
Once you say, our forefathers were silly, they thought he was from an apostolic authority, you discover that he is not, what do? You bin him. You consider him as very much influenced by the philosophy, the Greek philosophy, which is true, he is very much influenced by them. So therefore, as a consequence, he doesn't have any authority. He's equivalent to others. Worse, he's even unknown. We mistaken him with somebody else. So the consequence is what? How silly were our fathers. So he has been a little bit banned for few decades, and one of the rarest first to sort of give him a little bit of importance is Pope Benedict, which he is going totally against the current. He's going against the tendencies, the general tendency. You see what I'm trying to say? But I'm talking now history. So history, we can't do anachronism, which is we can't judge an era with today's light. We have to judge it with that light. So what happens is that in the Middle Ages, as I said, St. Bernard first, St. Anselm, St. Bernard, but as well, and most importantly, St. Albert the Great, St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Bonaventura, the four of them, five of them are doctors of the church, by the way, considered Dionysius like coming from an apostolic, having an apostolic authority. So what happens is that from the Middle Ages onward, the division in three will become extremely rigid. And the top of the rigidity, we have it in the 18th century and 19th century with different authors. One of them is a Carmelite, of course, way after Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, called Philip of the Trinity. And then, this is 18th century, then 19th century, we have a man called Valgornera. I think I'm pronouncing it properly. He's a Dominican, but he copied Philip of the Trinity. Philip of the Trinity has a synthesis. We are talking 18th century. By the way, I have the old book. I don't touch it too much because it's full of, it's really old, 2 centuries old, the book. You have 3 volumes divided following the 3 sections. So each volume is dedicated to one of the stages of spiritual life. So when you reach, now I'm jumping a little bit, when you reach the early 20s, when the church, the Western church, this side of the world church, goes through a renewal in spiritual theology, we have Father Garrigou Lagrange, we have Gardet, we have Poulain, we have Maréchal, etc. Yes, it's French names majority at that time. Garrigou Lagrange is present in Rome. He is the master of everything in theology, in metaphysics, and in spiritual theology with his major book that is still sold today. The 3 ways of interior life. It exists in English, by the way. I have a copy downstairs. So when we reach that renewal of spiritual theology in the early 20s till say seriously, if we talk about renewal, end of 40s, at the maximum, I would even go a bit before. This is a moment of great renewal in spiritual theology, but the structure is kept. The triune structure of purification, illumination, union is kept. So when Father Louis is, during his time, what he learns, what he reads, is all carrying this structure. So having Father Garrigou Lagrange as a main authority in Rome, and on the other hand, having Father Marie-Eugène, Blessed Father Marie-Eugène, what can you do? How can you explain the trial of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus? Where could you place it? You see? So that's the story. My desire studying this aspect was to understand how come the gospel could be, we could only see part of the journey, but not the entire journey. Today, by the way, if you ask me, what is the journey? I will say to you, it's a climbing and going down. But nobody, except maybe Plato and Nietzsche, talked about going down. We all aimed for union with God and considered that after union you die. So there is no descent. There is an ascent of Mount Carmel, there is no descent of Mount Carmel. You see what I'm trying to say? In the gospel, understood till today, is only an ascent. But we are not aware that we are still under the psychological and educational and cultural projection of the Greeks, where God is considered high up and not Jesus himself. This is a key, fundamental key, that is not used enough in the understanding of the journey. We consider God still a little bit like the Greeks. Union with God means, we are on top of the mountain and we are with God. But in fact, our role model is Jesus himself. And what did Jesus? Jesus came down from heaven, became incarnate, and gave himself. So, if we have a union, we meet Jesus halfway. Do you follow me? This is very important here. When we have union, we meet Jesus halfway in his descent. But once we have union, the goal of union, even Teresa of Avila says it, is to fulfill Jesus' mission, to continue, to extend, to prolong Jesus' mission on earth. Our vision wasn't Christological, I would say, and summing it up in a theological way. Our understanding, coming from this Greek background, it's not wrong. It's imperfect. It's not wrong. It's imperfect. There is a difference. They didn't say something that is wrong. They didn't mislead us, but it's not enough. We need more, especially today, especially with Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus as the doctor of the church. So, our model is Jesus. So, sitting there on top of the mountain is not the goal. The goal is Jesus, and Jesus is walking, and Jesus is going down. He who was considered as God didn't consider being like God or being God as a treasure, but he lowered himself. He became man. He lowered himself more, became a slave until and had been crucified. Philippians 3, I think, 2 or 3. So we have stages of descent in the gospel, and if we follow. We reread the gospel not with the limitations of the Greek background and culture, we will find that there is another journey of descent. If you want to know more about it, you can have this book. There are some copies there in the back. If you prefer this version that has maybe 1 or 2 extra pages, you can buy it on Amazon. Okay? So the spiritual journey, this exact one, you can have it from Amazon. Only Amazon. The spiritual journey, the setting for Christian hope. In this book, I don't overwhelm people with all this knowledge, but I am following the gospel and I'm trying to see, I'm trying to see if there is in the gospel any kind of structure, any a kind of growth, and indeed there is. Does the growth stop with union? No. With union starts another journey of imitation of Christ. But Christ is alive in us. Hence what Paul says, I complete in my flesh what is lacking in the sufferings in the passion of Jesus on the cross for the church. So that completing is this descent. We are not meant just to sit down on a comfortable chair in union. We are meant to reach union in order to serve better. Oh, I wish that this doctrine would spread in the church, because all our works will change. Our understanding of all what we do will change, because this is about doing, but a completely different doing. A doing where Jesus is alive and moving and acting, us in him, him in us, like St. Paul if you wish. Okay? And it ends with what? Martyrdom. It ends with what? The prison. Paul is imprisoned. Jesus is imprisoned. Before dying, he's imprisoned. Teresa of the Child Jesus, this trial is like a prison. She is in a dark place. It doesn't have to be a physical prison. She's dying on a bed, as she says. Not dying as a martyr. But this is true martyrdom. So what is true martyrdom? And I think that this a better understanding of the journey pushes us to renew our understanding in many fields. And this would be my third part in the PhD. Renewing our understanding of Jesus, Christology. Renewing our understanding of Mariology, because Mary is the best disciple and follower of Jesus. Renewing our understanding of apostolate, ministry. What is ministry? Is it just doing things, saying things, writing things, helping the poor? Or there is something else? Think of this descent. It renews our understanding of spiritual theology. It renews our understanding of ecclesiology. What is the church? What is the church? We are the church, but where are we? Are we here? 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 What is the church? Who is the church? You see what I'm trying to say? Etc., etc., etc. So, I tried, sorry I took a quarter of an hour more, and I tried to just give you a gist, a general gist, of this mysterious transmission or understanding that the Greek had. Inevitably, they couldn't escape from it. The majority of the authors I read, of course, sort of tend to sort of like laugh at or accuse the Greeks, the Christian Greeks, like these ones, Origen and Gregory. Oh, look, they were under the spell of their culture, of their philosophy. But hello, aren't you, writer, under the spell of your culture and your intellectual formation? Of course, we're all. You can't escape from that. We all have a background. And it's your background that conditions. And here in our case, Father Louis, despite his background, felt that he had to accept to think out of the box and say, how can we explain the case of Therese? Because I think deeply, deeply, bottom line, he met people who were in a similar trial of Therese. And if a spiritual director cannot understand that case, well, what is spiritual direction? At a certain stage, of course. The case of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, for 50 years, doesn't have any perception of Christ. So where is she? Where is she? Of course, this is too early to speak. Huh? Father Paul Murray, Dominican, said to me, well, let us not speak too much. Because it was before her beatification and canonization, but maybe now we can. No? If you read her book, no, Come Be My Light, it's a scandal, because you read one of the greatest saints of last century, who for 50 years doesn't have any perception of Jesus. Jesus is absent. So as a spiritual theologian, as a master in spiritual life, as a spiritual director, you're out of your depth. You don't know where do you place her? Is she still in a deep purification? Hello, for 50 years, the deep purification, come on. And she's a saint? It's like, it's contradictory. There must be something. And it is a participation into the passion of the Lord, because this is what we are supposed to do. Paul did it? Yes, he did it. All the apostles died martyrs, except John. And he died in a way martyr because he was thrown in a boiling oil. He was saved by God, so he's a martyr as well. Of course, what is martyrdom? What is our goal in life? Is it just to reach union and sit down on a comfortable chair and embrace Jesus? Or it is to imitate Jesus, to allow Jesus to continue in us his journey? The beauty of the early accounts of martyrdom is the following. The writer of the early accounts of martyrdom, I'm talking 1st, 2nd century, not after. It's beautiful. Why? Because he sees Jesus suffering in the person of the martyr. He sees Jesus undergoing his passion. Jesus already died and is risen when he writes, when these martyrs are dying. You see what I'm trying to say? But what the way the theology of martyrdom, how the martyrdom was described, was this. They could see through the martyr that Jesus was suffering in them and through them. Of course they are suffering as well, but both together. You see what I'm trying to say? So that's our vocation. We are called to love to that extent. Not necessarily to die killed or slaughtered or tortured, but what is martyrdom? And read John of the Cross and read Therese of the Child Jesus, who gave a renewed understanding of dying out of love. Okay? Now, I think I have to stop. So, you will receive a letter about the thesis, the PhD. Of course, as I said, the School of Mary depends on you. It doesn't depend on me only. It depends on you. It's survival, it's fruitfulness. So if you can contribute to these 6 extra months, I'll be extremely grateful. Whatever you can, you don't feel obliged. Don't take out of the food of your children to give to the school. That's not correct. It's only from an extra thing, if you can give. And consider that it's given not to me, it's given to Our Lady, and Our Lady knows how to thank you. If you can't give, that's absolutely fine. Your desire counts, your prayer counts, and this is fundamental, because it's our spiritual union together on the journey that counts. So let us put all this, put the church, put this history of the church, this understanding of the journey in the hands of God, in the hands of Our Lady. Let us ask the Lord to continue, to help us continue to serve Him humbly, to spread the light, to spread the gospel, and essentially the gospel. And let us say together the prayer that Jesus, the Lord, taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. I'm sure you understand that this is very explosive. It has rivers coming out of it. I could spend an entire year just teaching around these things, but of course, I think one has to limit things, not to go too far. But as I said, it has great influence. It can have great influence in different areas in the church. The least apostolate. What are we doing in the church? What does it mean to serve? Okay? Thank you very much. Safe journey.